Good evening and welcome to Planet Earth Poetry. My name is Kieran Regier and I'm the Artistic Director of Planet Earth Poetry, and I'm so thrilled to welcome the Malahat Review here tonight. I want to welcome Ian Higgins and Lamore Liss. We have four amazing readers and Ian's going to take over now, but I just wanted to say hello and welcome and thank you and introduce the editor of the Malahat Review, Ian Higgins.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me all right? A little bit closer? Yeah. Okay. Or I could speak up. Yeah.
Maybe you can just do
that. How's that? Yes? I'm terrible with mics, so shouldn't really be hosting at all. Anyway, just before we get started, we all know, those of us who are living under the colonial regime that we live, that we're on Indigenous land, and I want to recognize that where we are. We're in the territory of the LePan peoples, the Esquimalt and Songhees, which also overlaps with the Saanich peoples. And I want to say that I'm honored and grateful to be on these lands. And we have a Saanich poet with us tonight, Kevin, who's going to be reading a bit later. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks to the sponsors of this evening, the Writers Union of Canada, the League of Canadian Poets, the Victoria Foundation, Access Copyright, BC Arts Council, and then also sponsors for the Sponsor a Poet program, the Canada Helps page for Planet Earth Poetry, and especially Russell Books for providing this space. Any of us who've been off the island know how lucky we are on the island with bookstores. You can go to lots of big cities and find no books, whereas in Victoria, in this little village, we've got more books than we know what to do with. From the Malahat Review, I also want to thank the Canada Council, Canadian Heritage, and the University of Victoria, and then Kieran and Planet Earth Poetry. Generally, somebody was telling me tonight, this 28 years now that Planet Earth Poetry has been going. So think about that, 28 years. That's pretty amazing. Just a couple of housekeeping things. The washrooms are open downstairs, but the escalators will be turned off during the reading. They'll be on again once we're in a little bit of a break, and then there's an escalator.
An escalator. That corner. Yeah. And the washrooms that corner.
Okay. So you'll get your exercise if you need to go down there. We're going to begin with an open mic, and it looks like we've got about 8 or 9 people, and I'm just going to go in the order that I got the names from you, Karen. So the first open mic reader is Danielle Jeunesse. Danielle?
Kieran promised me that I would not be the first reader, so thank you, Kieran. I, along with some others, went to hear the Chinese poet and translator Zhao Shi today at the Sydney Library and was just blown away. So in part in honor of that reading and translation, I thought I would read a translation that was published in the Malahat in 2014, 10 years ago. This is my translation along with Julian Smith-Newman when John was the editor. And I'll first read the German from Jan Wagner. This was published in Berlin in 2010. Chamäleon. Älter als der Bischofsstab, denn es hinter sich herzieht, die Krümme des Schwanzes. Komm, herunter, rufen wir ihm zu, auf seinem Ast, während die Zunge als Teleskop herausschnellt, es das Sternbild
eine Libelle frisst. Ein Astronom mit einem Blick am Himmel und den anderen am Boden. So wartesten Abstand zu beiden. Die Augenkuppeln mit Schuppen gepanzert. Eine Festung, hinter der nur die Pupille sich bewegt. Ein nervöses Flackern hinter der Schießscharte. Manchmal findet man seine Haut wie einen leeren Stützpunkt, eine längst geräumte These. Komm herunter, rufen wir, doch es regt sich nicht, verschwindet langsam zwischen den Farben. Es versteckt sich in der Welt. And the English. Chameleon. Older than the bishop's hook that it drags behind the crook of its tail. Come down, we call him on his branch, while the tongue, like a telescope, shoots out, nabs the asterism of a dragonfly, an astronomer with one eye on the heavens and the other on earth, so preserves its distance from both. Its eye orbs, scale armored, a fortress behind which only the pupils shift, a nervous flicker behind the embrasure. Sometimes you find its skin like a deserted structure, a long abandoned theory. Come down, we call, but it won't stir. Vanishes slow amid the colors, disappears in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. And since I didn't know you weren't supposed to read first, I should say tut mir leid. I'm sorry. Pamela Porter is the next reader.
We've lived on the peninsula for 35 years, and we've always had horses. At this time, we have 3 horses on our small horse farm, along with 2 barn cats and a very goofy German Shepherd. This poem is called How You Lived. The horses that we care for tend to live a long time, but the time often comes when we have to bury them. This is titled How You Lived. Second night of your colic, I left the children in their beds and walked under pines to the pasture where you lay. Our globes of breath met between us like a ghost. No moon our witness. I held 2 syringes in my hand, one to ease your pain, the other for the end. I pressed against your 1,000 pounds, willing you to stand, and hid the needle for pain behind me in one palm. You dropped your thick gelding neck, and I pushed it in. You'll recall I wondered aloud what creatures we might be in another life. Said I'd know you anywhere by your gaze. With only the cold company of stars, I saw clear what had clouded my brain before and since, that we emerge from and return to a separate place, naked and spared of memory. I'll admit I was afraid to sleep, perched in a corner stiff with hay. Yet your 30-year-old frame was standing at dawn when I woke, and we walked, your hooves shuffling up dust. I suppose what's left to us is mystery. Whether I simply did it all correctly, or the universe opened up just for us, I doubt them both. Or that you could choose, and did, and lived.
Thank you, Pamela. The next reader is Marlene Comment.
This poem is from the, let's see, winter issue 2003. So if there's a prize for the oldest issue, maybe I'll get it. Morocco in the poem is the title of a Hollywood film released in 1930. Awake. Sleep is a nomad, roaming the Sahara, the Kalahari, far from my bed, a desert too dry for dreaming, far from the time-sculpted dunes of my hips and thighs, thinning skin crinkled like crepe paper. Down the hall, the bathtub offers its enamel embrace, the sturdy legs of a steadfast suitor. The water, a tribe of lovers, lapping, licking, calling my aging body beautiful. I won't chase sleep like Dietrich, running into the desert after Gary Cooper in Morocco. Let sleep pitch its tent. Let it come to me.
Thank you, Marlene. Our next reader is Catherine Saint-Denis.
Thank you so much, Ian. It's so fun to be part of the Malahat party. This poem I'm about to read, I just learned that it's going to be in Best Canadian Poetry 2025. I have a passion for zombies. This poem is called 5 Years After Joe Overdosed on Fentanyl. In October, I teach the zombie dance from Thriller for PE. Tweens are fascinated by death and Michael Jackson, his hilarious pelvis. They begin by lying on the varnished floor, tongues lolling and necks craning, searching out friends to share mangled pronouncements. The beat drops. And then comes the gangly rise from the grave, all awkward elbows and one-shouldered shrugs. A synthesized fanfare cues 29 students to start lurching forward, knees and eyes askew, the undead in gym shorts and tees, shoelaces bobbing. They raise clawed hands, and the ones with rhythm really get it, stomping in circles with leaden calves, grapevining in lockstep, torsos awry. And even the kids who mess up look convincing, a bumbling confusion, the opposition of bodies controlled by hindbrain viruses or adolescence. With all this movement and melody, with all these pulsing veins of bass, how could they possibly know how it ends? Sitting on a love seat with one arm around your 6-year-old, telling her about daddy, wanting to somehow do it right, as if such news can be spread gently over a child like bubbles in the bath. Should you have turned the television off first? Never mind. At this point, there will be few tears. It is not until the cat passes 2 years later that the sobs will rise, fierce and wet. This is how a life ends, spilling all the way past the rim of time. We were buying cuffed boots and a musketeer hat at the thrift shop as he died. My kid grinned and proclaimed to be using the one-tooth maneuver on her pumpkin that night. The next morning, Joe's mom slackened on the sidewalk like a marionette, stringing her face to the palm of the sky. He was nowhere, everywhere. At the winter concert, our daughter belted "O Hanukkah" Ethel Merman style. Camping, she found a heavy moon snail, held it rippling in her hands, wondrous, alive. A substitute teacher insisted she make a Father's Day card. Our old cat was ailing. The vet prepared the needle that would uncouple her from her pain. Rising swells of people uncoupled themselves again and again. Now, in this middle school gym, preteens are mocking death, their tilted grins raised to the ceiling, their stilted bodies pretending that even after the gruesome end, there's a hunger that lingers, a world to upend.
Thank you, Catherine. Rhonda Gantz is our next reader.
Good evening. The first poem I had published in a literary magazine is the Malahat Review, and John selected it. Thank you, John. This one's in a later edition. Sojourn to a minor planet. Hey girl, you must respond in the affirmative. Please put a smile on for the affair. We need to believe the physic is working. We need you to say you're fine. That is to say, do not arrive lobotomized. Oops. That is to say, do not arrive disconsolate. That is to say, not lobotomized. The guests expect an effervescent evening. The council checks for ache behind the eyes. Is it not enough Daddy named the spaceship after you? Not enough the lark in his cage tuned to minor key? Daddy declared a week of public mourning. All that money we spent on etiquette. Please refrain from mixing analgesics at the table. No, you may not bring scissors as your date. You'll sit next to the man who came back from Dolero. Christophe mistakenly slut-shamed you, but he apologized. This hurts us more than it hurts you, of course. Astronauts starved of breath on the voyage to Hygeia. Daddy will build a minaret for them to lie in state. Believe us when we say the calculations were precise. We will auction your virginity, a nostrum to mend the populace. That is to say, rehearse a new last name. That is to say, stop playing footsie under the table. Vesta, Cybele, Psyche, Potentia, proof they are no less beautiful than Mars. The rocket man you love in decomposing orbit, a jar of addled fireflies to lead the cortege home. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Kate Braid now.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
This poem probably takes the cake for the oldest. This was published in the Malahat in 1994. So you weren't even born then. In 1992, I had gone to Cape Breton to do a CBC Ideas program on a men's coal mining choir called Men of the Deeps. And wonderful, wonderful guys. And so I had interviewed all of them about the mine and what's it like and being a miner and their singing and so on. Of course, they wouldn't let me go underground, although I was dying to, because it's bad luck to have women underground. I think they barely were allowing women on ships at that time because it was bad luck, but hopefully that has changed. So that was in 1994. And in 1992, you probably remember there was that terrible explosion at Westray. And everyone knew that mine was incredibly dangerous in Cape Breton, very badly planned, and 26 miners were killed. So one of the people I interviewed was Randy Fichette, who was the president of the Westray Mine Workers Union. And so I wrote this poem to honor Randy and the miners. And I thought I wanted to read this one tonight because we don't hear a lot about working people. And I'm really happy to acknowledge them and their work. So this is written like an interview. 1, the miner. Tell me what it's like in the mine. It's a long, dark dream. How does it smell? Still. Are you afraid? I wrestled early with fear. Now I wear courage in the cut above my eye, blue where the coal has marked me. I should tell you that in Cape Breton, if a miner gets coal in any kind of underground injury, it makes a permanent blue mark, and they call it a blue tattoo. And that's the name of this poem. Why do you go? Because I'm never alone there. I have learned to walk lightly above the earth and lightly inside it. I have become a part of the softly breathing rock. 2, the miner's wife. Do you mind when he goes down the mine? I am a woman invisible. He goes like a blind man pulled by sirens. What do you do while he's gone? I weep and twist my mouth into the strange shapes I know are all around him, into words I hope can protect him. And what do you say when the alarm bells sound? Oh, holy, oh, holy. What about your sons? I have only daughters now. 3, the miner's daughter. What does your father do? He beats on the rock till the blood comes. And your ma? She embraces the cold, hard facts, dies uneasy. And you? I am not yet born. I will not come until there is light. 4, the miner's son. How old are you? Too old, too young. What is your work? To sweep the earth under my father's feet, to pick the black rock he might stumble on. Are you ever sorry to be his son? He is sorry to be my father. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Barbara Pellman is next reader.
What a lovely gang of people here. So I tried and tried to get into the Malahat Review, and I had to win a contest in order to get in it. So here it is. So this is 2018, and it allowed my daughter and grandson and me to, well, part of the money, when all of the money, part of the thing went to go to Switzerland. That was a long way to say. And it's a glossa because I love glossas. And I think one thing to mention, so the ivory-billed woodpecker is mentioned as extinct, but apparently they saw it again just recently. And it also mentions the deer nesting under the Gary Oak, and they're gone. They're not extinct, but they're pretty well not as often in my back garden. The poem is called Nevertheless, and the 4 lines borrowed are from W.S. Merwin, from a poem called Listen. And these are the 4 lines. We are saying thank you faster and faster. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you. We are saying thank you and waving, dark though it is. For the brief snowfall that salts the cedar branch, for the rain that follows, for daffodils straining to lift their green hoods, for cut tulips on the pine table, for the few days left until spring, for the light lingering a bit longer each day, and Christmas lights still sparkling on city trees, for brief moments of sunshine through dark cloud, for the scent of things to come, we are saying thank you, faster and faster, because nothing lasts, the hard lesson. That summer riding the trains in Europe, city squares, a texture of brick and cobblestone, the gleaming Duomo, narrow streets where I wandered, hoping to remember everything. Because one brief night in Amalfi, jasmine, and the sound of wind in the olive trees. Nothing lasts. The colors fade like old fresco. The taste of gelato slides from the tongue. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you. Though we seldom hear the call of the roseate tern or the piping clover, and never the ivory-billed woodpecker, though the California condor, whose huge wings shadow the hills, returns tentative, and though the western black rhino is gone, and soon the northern white rhino, Sumatran tiger, mountain gorilla, long lists categorized, vulnerable, threatened, extinct. Yet each winter the hummingbird returns to the hawthorn, the rhododendron to the bush, and we are saying thank you and waving to the deer nesting under the Gary Oak, the rare sharp-shinned hawk on the fence post, the star magnolia pressing her white blooms against the window, to the many acts of kindness from neighbors and strangers, to the new words on toddlers' tongues, the cat curling under the bed, the dog at the door hoping, to the lovers gone, and the one who returns for an occasional drink for old time's sake, for the sake of the future, dark though it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next reader is Cynthia Woodman-Kirkham.
Thank you. Well, there must be something about glossas and contests, and that's the way to get into the Malahat. So I think that's the lesson tonight to take away, because this is the poem that got me into the Malahat, and it was a contest. It was the Open Season Award, and it owes its long ride to Kieran, in fact, who pushed it through the system, I believe.
I shortlisted it.
Shortlisted, there you go. Oh yeah, pushed it through the system doesn't sound right, does it? I didn't know Kieran then, honestly. It's called Late Summer in Frederick Arm, and as a glossa, it borrows 4 lines from D.H. Lawrence. It's an homage to him, it's an homage to poets, and it's an homage to place. Frederick Arm is up above Desolation Sound,
And when we had a sailboat, we spent all summers up there poking around in those bays and those inlets and that gorgeous, gorgeous coast that we have here. So the 4 lines are, they call all experience of the senses mystic when the experience is considered. So an apple becomes mystic when I taste in it the summer and the snows, the wild welter of earth, and the insistence of the sun. Late Summer in Frederick Arm. Here at the head of the crucifix, Frederick Arm flows into Nadali's channel. Cordero is the crosspiece. A week anchored at a half-drowned dock. Frederick was a British explorer, but the name is known to me from a child's tale of a mouse who spends his hours slow gathering nuts and noticing the gauze of dusk's mayfly over the lake's smooth cheek. His neighbors scurry about their work, chastise Frederick's laziness, make their disapproval heard. They call all experience of the senses mystic when the experience is considered. The Frederick and me wonders this morning how to translate the preening of herring gulls lined on a log, chatter of croaks and caws, tweets and quacks that must be about fish and the obstinacy of tick under wing. Into silence comes the click of alder leaves as they tumble gold amongst evergreen, the scritch of gravel on logging roads, a rock slide's distant throaty rumble. How know we are alive if not in the noticing? In an abandoned orchard sit. So an apple becomes mystic when I taste in it the drip of glaciers, granite dust, and tart sun, or in the flesh of a stiro basin trout, the taste of water grasses, sweet lake, a dusting of sea. I soak in this elemental place, the lightness of spirit and aura of limitless days, float in the wild silence, where all the Fredericks can stretch their reach beyond the business of living, can pull into eyes and lungs full girth the summer and the snows, the wild welter of earth. Each hour skims magic, like phosphorescence in a night sea. Here senses rule, and Fredericks store their visions for the telling in the long winters, when the seeds are nearly spent, when the dark cave closes in, and trapped mice seek the value of experience considered. Then Frederick will rise, recount tug of unfurling leaf, green smell of ocean, and the insistence of the sun. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Our second to last reader is Megan Rada Mahler.
Hi all, I'm so grateful to be here. I wasn't sure if I was going to read like kind of up until the last second, A, because I was a little late, and B, because this poem technically isn't published in the Malahat yet. It's forthcoming in the spring issue. And this is also my first poem published in the Malahat and published in Gen A. So I thought that like sticking with the kind of theme of like grief and also like dying animals that I've been hearing, I would read this one. It's called I Buried the Chickens in a Pit in My Backyard. A hole as big as a fist, a wall to put the fist through, hungry things to give the wall a will to live. A hole as big as a tooth mark, a head bitten off 2 caved-in shoulders, the weight of the bodies like nothing had been lost. Just yesterday, we were sitting in the sun, cracked all open and orange in the sky, piercing through dust kicked up like light through a dirty lace veil. How to deal with grief, I don't really know. What is left to beg for when you sit in the bones? It is a waste of blood to be mad at something, just looking to eat, but a farmer's job is barbed wire, the digging up of misfortune in earth that is too dry for anything to grow, but is good enough for a burial. The digging up, the wall, underground, the spiteful roots, the pieces of concrete, the wall, my gloved hand, the spade, stepping to pack it down. Wings crushed under a steel toe, pushed into the earth as a wishbone pair of tulip bulbs. I would have fired a shotgun for you, probably. I would have loved you forever, I think. The worms do what the worms do.
Thank you, Megan. And the final open mic reader is founder of Poetry Zone, Karen Regier.
Thanks, Ian. It's an honor to read with all the Malahat readers, all the Malahat poets. This was also my first publication, I think. I was like a third-year student, but it's a bit long, so I won't read that one. Sorry, I should have had this marked. Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'm really sorry. I have to go to the contents. Oh, this is so terrible. Oh, so unprofessional. Page 82. You know, I wrote open them. Okay, here we go. Neti neti. Neti neti is Sanskrit for not this, not this. It's like what people who are renunciates use to kind of create dispassion between themselves and the world. So neti neti. Oh, and it's a ghazal, so each couplet is kind of its own little thing. There's no narrative here. Where the body, they tell us, like an old cape, a cloudscape, earthenware jar holding space. Want nothing and touch the world with a Midas finger. Everything becomes gilt-edged and luminous. When removing our shoes at the temple door, we find our lotus feet slippery with mud. A still of the earth taken from space is detached from human existence, and yet human. The wind stops blustering and settles. Clouds bloom under the knees, inside the pineal. Cabbage moths floating in a blue bowl. We know not to waste our birth on what won't last. To die into life is to become life itself. The sun no longer burns us. It rises within. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, again. After that wonderful tasting menu earlier in the evening, we're going to have a slightly fuller set of 4 courses here with 4 poets, and I'm going to introduce them all at the same time, just to simplify things, and then each of them will be able to come up and read it. I'll introduce them in the order that they're going to read, so that inaugurating this section of the thing is John Barton, who many of you will know as the past editor of the Malahat Review and the person who's set it on the course that it's sailing on now. And I owe a debt to John for leaving things in such good order that when I started, it was just a matter of receiving the baton and carrying on. John is the author of a number of books and has a chapbook that's just out, which is on the table, and another book coming out this year.
No,
Next year. Okay, yeah. So even small presses, right? It's not, things are slow. So John will be reading first, and I'm not sure what you're going to be reading from, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, all sorts of things. So I'll leave that to you. And then Warren Haiti, who's come down from Up Island, I guess, this evening, whose work was in, is it the winter issue? I'm already working on the summer issue, so I don't, and just sent the spring one to the printer, so I don't remember which issues. But you've got work in the winter issue, living in the territory of the Saanich Nation, teaching at Vancouver Island University, author of several books, and I suppose the most recent one is, there's a one forthcoming called Diaphora, which you will be able to tell us about. Then Yvonne Blomer, who many of you will know because Yvonne was involved with this series for a long time and has been in the city's literary scene in all sorts of ways as an author, but also as an editor, especially of collections devoted to the land and our relation to the land. And the most recent one that you're working on right now is Ice. Okay, so Ice is where it's at now. So Yvonne will be third. And then our last reader is Philip Kevin Paul, who's from the Saanich Nation and has been doing an awful lot of work on SENCOTEN, amazing work there that some of us eventually hope to see at some point, is a real champion of the language and champion of the values of that nation, and is the author of two books, both of them award winners, Little Hunger and Taking the Names Down from the Hill. So Kevin will close the evening out. So John, I'll ask you to come up first and open the reading.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Karen. So I'm going to start with a poem that appeared in Malahat in, I'm not sure which issue, but the mid-90s. It was chosen while Derek Walcott was the editor of the Malahat from 1992 to 1998. I published a poem under nearly every editor except one. So I could say that I beat you all because I published in 1981, but I'm not reading a poem from that issue. So this poem takes its inspiration from the art of M.C. Escher, and I use Escher to explore a relationship I had with a childhood friend. And it's simply called Escher. One thing becomes another. Two boys grow up, grow apart, live in different cities, day and night cleaving in two. Clouds of geese overhead, migrating in opposed directions, sun or moonlight molting from their wings, and mirrored across the dark, rain-slicked roofs of slate. As one of us rises from bed while the other sleeps, goose down from our pillows tangled in our hair, like herring in the nets of trawlers setting or heaving anchor in oceans where the rivers below our windows empty, uncoiling like endless opalescent snakes, swallowing their tails somewhere beyond the circle limit of the horizon. An infinite labyrinth of fields spread in shrinking multiples past the eye's dawn or rain-slick lit rim, while the backwash of high tide thrums far upstream against warehouse quays like blood lured through the veins of the heart, its own circle limit collapsing inward as memory spirals down a vortex of expanding particulars, which with every tighter downward turn more minutely blur, dizzying the flesh aging in the arms of those who love us, blind, weary flesh, later sitting by itself to read the identical books of Escher prints we gave each other, loosening with knives those pages now swollen shut, the hand-stitched bindings silty from the flood that leaks through the shale and mortar of our shallow basements. Ebb and flow overtook us. So, as Ian mentioned, I just published a chapbook called Stopwatch with a new chapbook press in Fredericton called Emergency Flash Mob Press, which is edited by Ian Letourneau, who's the managing editor of the Fiddlehead. And the title poem, so first of all, I'll just say it's all sonnets, or my version of the sonnet. And the title poem is called I Am a Stopwatch, and it's 10 sections long, and each one is a different decade of my life, starting from my conception and projected up until my death. When I was 10 years old, I decided that I would die at 89. So the last year is 2046. So I've got 22 years to go. So which will win, my will or my body? I don't know. So I'm going to read 2 sections. I should just say that the title is a reference to the opening sentence of Christopher Isherwood's novel, Goodbye to Berlin, I Am a Camera. And I use as the epigraph the next sentence. Someday, all this will have to be developed, carefully printed, fixed. I Am a Stopwatch, Split 1, 1956. Sperm meets ovum, and I joined history. With months to go, a stopwatch sprouting toes and mouth, hands racing forward to shadow my face, time's small circle lapped already, the body tricked out with default standards few judge as partial. Privates I'll soon be tactful about, though they are plain to see between spread legs, dangly, circumspect, sword wet, when I'm bluntly in need of changing, if not yet trained toward uses some put theirs to, discharge sucked up by the space race and the missile crisis. No fire exchanged, the love Baldwin has men speak nothing but shame. They lop off at the neck or erase. And I'm going to read Split 5. Split 5, 1997. The police break in and find you naked, severed penis in one hand, the blades arc, slicing downward still, your contused orchid, my mouth likes taking in, the skin sheer dark petals about the stamen slow to part as you come, the blame you'd feel unearned, death's biota you feared passing on, smart with seed, so you end your life as I turn 40. The decade denuded by loss, drugs just starting to annul the blood's sick ebb, sap lured back into limbs, trees leafless, the spring you die, unmarred snow, the medics muddy, tramped down as you are borne away, love a body bag closed, chaos betrayed. So the middle section of the book is, oh.
Just happened to our speaker. No. Oh, it did. Holy cow. I'm so sorry, John.
This happened to me at a Malahat event. And we had to change the batteries in the microphone. I think it was when you were reading, Pam. Yeah, and you know, at least I had practice changing the batteries. But I described it as the world's most boring magic trick. So I'm kind of glad it's not me who has to do this. So I'm back? Okay. Okay. So the middle section is a crown about the pandemic. So I will jump that. And the last section are poems about the climate crisis, I suppose. So I'm going to read two of those. This one's called Bomber Season, and it's kind of inspired by the paintings of E.J. Hughes and his paintings about sort of the working coast. But of course, he also painted the interior. This is about Bomber Season. Down through the valleys below glaciers, mirroring as they evaporate less and less heat back at the sun, unroll stressed tongues of lightning kindled asphyxia, breathlessness on the fly to daze the earth, flames parkouring from white spruce to lodgepole, sap so baked some groves self-immolate, scrolls of embers smoldering through undergrowth before raging on, transcript from left not blank, but dense with smoke, fitful rainfall won't lift, evacuees and low-ceilinged kamloops hanging fire, while too close the trees burn, tanks of water, tanks of lake water dropped from above to shift drought, bombers low after they fill and swoop. And then the final poem, which is about the breakwater. Well, that's a setting. It's called Long Range Forecast. Walking into what lies ahead through fog along the breakwater, I sense its bent granite finger blindly beckon. Joggers as they breeze past, light-footed, confident as I am not. The beacon at the end, too faint, with its bloodshot light to cut through what may unroll next. The low-hanging stench of burnt inland trees, sudden heat, hail, spewed by atmospheric rivers, drought, snowmelt, while at last urging higher the levels of freighted seas. Yet somehow I have built in the stillborn haze of such upheaval, a day-to-day, years-long walking practice, the boots I resole, worn thin by witness. I'm going to read one poem from Lost Family, and it also is a poem that appeared in the Malahat in the queer perspectives issue under Ian, but selected by Ali Blythe. And it's about this bracelet, which was given to me by a friend of mine who lives in New York and cleared out the apartments of men who died of HIV in the 1980s and 90s. Kenny's bracelet, a twined, hammered twist of what's left of him. Nickel, copper, brass, a glinting soldered echo you heard, found in his apartment was emptied out, found as his apartment was emptied out. Noise-tamped studio, dim with what became the East Village, retro when gentrified. How he lived forgotten, what killed him, a virus loving thousands of men, an artifact, the past scarecrow, outstaring fear, garbage cleared from Broadway, the ignored way he died, not how we are let go, dying now. His bracelet, a scar you wrap about my wrist, longing reclaimed, a molten link my skin warms, how like me he used to sit, hands clasped about one knee. And I'm going to read two more poems. I'm going to read a poem from this book, Designs from the Interior, which I published 30 years ago, which feels very strange. Touch. Pastry spreads from my fingers like history, like braille. The edges thin under the practiced weight of a marble rolling pin. The dough opening from the center. With a knife, I caress, ease out the final circle, put it into a glass pie plate. Shell after shell I make while you watch. The touch my mother gave me is in my hands as they form dough into a ball, the secret society of pastry passed down from parent to child. Male or female, it doesn't matter, though many times a boy has watched his mother spin globes of dough into sudden reservoirs of pleasure on her sun-warmed countertop. My gift is this shaping, this tactile instinct for shortening and flour. It molds to whatever form you give me, turns golden around whatever we want it to hold. And the last poem is a sonnet variation called The Duplex, which was, conceived by the American poet Jericho Brown. And you'll hear the pattern in the poem. It's called Peas and Carrots. I shall, while he scrubs, peels, and dices, love a shell we peel, cruel inside. Loneliness, a shell hulling us from inside. What's boiled, found to taste better with butter. The boiling point reached, makeup sex goes buttery. I wash the plates before he starts to clean up. Should we shower apart, we don't feel clean. In pots on the boil, bugs rise to the top. Orange, not boiling dry with green on the stove top. Mixed singularities served with every meal. Love and loneliness spooning our usual meal. So usual a side dish with heat going soft. Fridge cold, not restoring crunch to softness. I shall while he scrubs, peels, and dices. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John. Warren, Katie, please welcome him.
These are 3 poems from the Malahat Review from the autumn 2023 issue. This one is called End of Summer. Closer to the mic. How's that? End of summer. School buses, untouched for months, slumbering in their yoke-colored robes. Tall grasses, tan with thirst. Across the bay, the mill smoking its pipe. Light, calmly lacquering all things. The monkish rabbit, bolt upright, its antennae tilting this way, that. Tar black the chasm between this instant and the next. At the threshold of hearing, continuous tinnitus of violence. House. Under the carpet, the stairs grit their teeth. The vents are silent now, but the house is drenched in adrenaline. The plaster ripples like the flank of a horse. The stillness of earth. It was a fiction. In the kitchen, the stench of melted plastic and cheap beer. In the hall, the offal of the smashed clock. The littlest things keep vigil. This knitting needle, this teaspoon. Don't mark the door with blood. Over the rooftops, the darkness is rushing. Apophasis is a Greek word that means away speaking. It, in the medieval Christian tradition, came to be called the via negativa. It's an attempt to talk about divine things by saying what they aren't. Apophasis. Every morning, the wall. Featureless, seamless, colorless, cool. It vanishes in every direction. You kneel. Wasted the gesture. They lied who said it was a medium. Or worse, whatever's there has nothing to say. Look, not colorless, but throbbing like porphyry. Touch it, not cool, but humid with fever. Bass note of ocean shouldering breakwater. The wall shudders, but does not crack. Suddenly, you remember who made the wall. Those are poems from a little book that is not yet at the printers that has been beautifully designed by Rhonda Gantz. And the next poems that I'm going to read are from that typescript as well. This poem is called Will Breaking, and there's an epigraph from the French philosopher Simone Weil, and it translates roughly as, if my eternal salvation were on this table in the form of an object, and I only needed to extend my hand to take it, I would not reach out unless I had received the order. Will breaking. You sit at the kitchen table. Luther sits across from you. Between you, your salvation appears as an injured starling, its beak lipsticked with blood, its eyelids clenched like nutcrackers. Beside it, the chalice of acid. You reach for the starling, and Luther slams the meat tenderizer on your hand. In her green chapel, the Magdalene won't stop weeping. You reach again, and again, the nerves take his no to your brain. Hope, how the will thrashes in its cell, having tested every surface, and then testing them again. A wasp praying against a window pane, its total failure to learn. The Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein published one and only one book in his lifetime. Then he quit philosophy and went to teach school children in the hills. The book was called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. And Wittgenstein took himself to have solved all the problems of philosophy with this book, until one day this is a legend, he was on a train with his friend Piero Sraffa, and his friend made a gesture of sweeping his fingertips underneath his chin like this. And he said to his friend Wittgenstein, "Can your book explain the meaning of that?" And according to the legend, that broke the spell, and Wittgenstein renounced his entire book and quit teaching school children and went back to Cambridge and tried to do philosophy again. So this poem is called the Tractatus. It's for Jan's Wiki. It stands in the marsh, wicker ribs around its heart, its hands folded like those of a mantis. It was meant to depict the world, but abandoned, derelict, unloved by its maker, it stands on its delicate stilts, surrounded by junk. A salmon-colored sofa, a couple of TV sets, soaked phone books. And yet, the intricacy of the articulations, each hinge made by hand and painted with a miniaturist's strictness. In each picture, another system of hinges. It is thinking about the objects, their possibilities of combination, how they fit together like the links in a fob chain, how they never answered to their names. As it thinks, its antlers crystallize. Only once in the last century, a crane saw it as a mate, danced in courtship. Perfect mirror, every step it reflected motionlessly. This one is called Purgatorio Canto 27. And as you may know, Dante wrote 3 canticles of his Divine Comedy, and the middle one is called the Purgatorio. This is where Dante climbs up Mount Purgatory, led by his teacher Virgil, and he sort of gets a preview of what it's going to be like to die and the trials that he'll have to go through. And depending on which terrace he's on, he has a harder time when the sins are sins that are familiar to him. And the 7th terrace is the terrace of lust. And this is the terrace on which he has the hardest time. What is love? The answer has never not been violent. This morning, watching the stove coil turning dark red, then orange, the water starting to churn and boil, the kettle itself seeming to melt, you think of the penitent on the 7th terrace, how love walked him through the wall of flame, how he wanted halfway there to cool himself in molten glass, how the temporal, the eternal fires are nothing next to the candle stub guttering on the altar of the heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. So, Yvonne Blomer.
Thank you, Warren. That was beautiful. And John, lovely to hear you. It's a little bit like a trip down memory lane because Danielle and Warren and I were at UVic together many, many years ago, and then reading through the old issues of the Malahat. And it's a delight to be here. So thank you, Ian, and thank you, Kieran, for putting on tonight. I think I'm gonna go from the most recent backwards, just for fun. I'm recovering from a cough, but I've had it for over 2.5 weeks, so please do not be afraid. I picked it up on my way to a warm place, so that was a bummer. This poem is called Rhubarb, Death in a Garden, and it came out in the 2015 I don't know. Where does it say? What season? Spring 2015. And it was a great delight to have this poem come out in the Malahat. Lots of friends emailed me to tell me how great it was, which was superb. And I was touring a book in Ontario and had borrowed a little device from my husband so I could send emails. And John and I edited it while I was on a train. So that's a good memory as well. And it's inspired by, well, it's inspired by gardening. Rhubarb, Death in a Garden. Still winter, late winter. The ember fists push up from the heart of the bed. Soil from desiccated houseplants, the garden's ash and bone. Daily the rain, then more rain, then a week of sun. Fists breed fingers, loose skin wrapped at the knuckles. Nearby, a dog chases a snake into a tree's dead end. Sun burns the rain off, and fingers become umbrellas swaying. Hotter still, sun melts red to green palms open on arms now firm, purple. In Britain, for the world war starved, leaves endorsed as a food source led to a poisoned and deepening hunger. Here, I step past the reach of these large, fanned, and deadly hands. Center point to my garden. They offer the only shade and shelter to this newly turned earth. Over a day, they double in size. Then, pushing out from between petioles and leaves, rare inflorescences in subtle pinks. From the kitchen, I think an early squash, think a bulbous sprung shape, or what? A bird perched? I will not harvest limbs, will not slice off their poisoned hands. Wait to reap by candlelight their first arms, then oats and sugar, butter, slice the bleeding limbs and bake. Soft and tart on the tongue and on the belly, cathartic. So I had two poems in the 2007 issue of the Malahat, which was a great delight. I think John was editing for Vehicule Press, was a poetry editor for somewhere. No.
It would have been Signature.
Signature. And he rejected my manuscript. But he asked if he could have a couple of the poems for the Malahat. So that was very, very lovely. So thank you, John. It's okay. These poems have since been published in books. So this is a pantoum called The Wedding Dance. Did you see them? That couple, those others? Her cheek, moonlight on earth, his hand, the cut of his figure, his shadowed smile, music, a flower, fragrant between them. Her cheek, moonlight on earth, his hand squared to her shoulder, this holding of music, flowers, fragrant between them. One heart shattering against straw-like bone. Squared to her shoulder, this holding of just married. Did you see her father's one heart shattering against straw-like bone? Jealous and lovesick, longing for histories, just married. Did you see her father's love, the woman whose eyes are all scorn, jealous and lovesick, longing for history's first savored kiss, kissed on some now long gone. Love the woman whose eyes are all scorn, and love the boy. Did you see him looking? First savored kiss, kissed on some now long gone. The girl he would have asked, she's there dancing. And love the boy. Did you see him looking forlorn? The woman he asked just turned. The girl he would have asked, she's there dancing with the man she would like to love. And then in 2005, my series of ghazals, Landscapes and Home, was shortlisted for the Long Poem Prize. So I'm going to read a couple of those. And they're in Book of Places. So these are ghazals. The first one is a formal ghazal. And I'd learned about the ghazal in classes with Lorna by a presentation by students in the class and completely fell in love with the form. And at that time, I was also studying fiction with Jack Hodgins, and he introduced an Australian writer whose name I forget, but who spoke about your first home and how forever you're imprinted by the first place you live in life, and you carry the echo of that place to every future place you go. And so between the learning about the ghazal in one class and not really writing fiction, but kind of writing poetry that wasn't broken into lines with Jack Hodgins, I started to explore, having been born in Zimbabwe and having grown up in Canada, and these two kind of colonial heritages that I carry in me, and the spaces and places and memories of those places. So that's where these poems came from. And they're just numbered. Can't seem to line up my mic, my glasses, and the words. One. In the dark, there are eyes, landscapes, and home. We traveled by boat, ship. Finally, a plane takes us home. This webbing feeds memories, the recesses, where we can name everything, make a home. Here is always different. Harare, Bindura. In Canada even, we move, try to claim a home. The rising sun or no sun, instead a blanket of rain. The body comes back to itself, wakes at home. Piles of leaves or sand dunes, green battles brown. If I blow a kiss, pressed lips snake home. Home is hot or wet, a bird's nest. Dry stalks, green leaves, a make-believe home. Who am I? My body, this traveling thing. Yvonne, each thread of memory aches of home. 2. Just so you know, the dog in these poems survives. 2. In Bulawayo, Dad hit our black dog with the car. These days follow me, heat burns the shade. Blood colors me crimson, blues my toenails. A menstrual cycle in May, a road trip coming home. The servant steals Mom's silverware. She holds 2 babies close. Mosquito netting keeps everything in. My sister under a tree, snake in hand. Coil a circle around the 4 of us. Nap time. 2 months pregnant. Fruit ripens too quickly in this shade. See how you've embraced yourself, Yvonne? 3. Peace for a long weekend. The ring that wants to fall. A promise, a lie. I can't fit these shoes anymore. Slipping into myself, I find things forgotten. Smooth stone, sharp needle, curled finger, a long, soft sigh. Two sisters play in the heat, bathing water snakes, peeling memories away like skin. Thin, everything gets in. Dad with a gun, pressed to gravel, the dog howls. Mom hides us in the bedroom. He can do this, can't kill the chickens. Head first, feet first, left hand, right hand. Mother pushes her chick off the branch, an ambiguous gesture. 4. There is a candle burning on the edge of this table. An older sister washes her sheets in the downstairs bathroom. The face of a Zulu carved out of soapstone, contours, burnt straw, a sponge drips onto a wooden floor. Sometimes children forget where they are going, turning too fast, an invisible dog in the shade. Water wings and pudgy cheeks, those elephants knock down trees just to find solitude, darkness. White eyes glow like amber, first menstruation, stained fingers, the smell of iron. 5. His skin is burnt through, fish scales, sun-dried wood. Those old eyes take it all in. This boy wants to swing, Nana's cold, sharp hands. Dad says baby's bones are more malleable. 2 lips parted, his breath smells like charcoal. The quick tide takes everything, even the schoolhouse. Some man kills himself, takes his children with him. Kiss Dad on the cheek, smell an empire in that old leather. The crash of a storm, bulrushes, dandelions, tulips. Tonight we ate sushi, imagined ourselves, this burning flesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. So, Kevin, please welcome Kevin Paul.
Surely you could do better at that. So I'm going to mostly read unpublished poems, but I'll start with a couple that come from my book, Little Hunger, the second book I wrote. When I tell people I've never seen fireflies, some of them are taken quite aback, but I never have. Having never seen fireflies. Oh, by the way, Techel siya high school kwatsa na Techel. Louis uaid high school kwatsa na Techel. Steno ay na eskwela kwan. Efeshe. Kudis kuta at playlist. Ay eskwela kwan. At the mokusail at the Techel. Just, I'm happy to be here. Having never seen fireflies. The restaurant's closing. Tea lights going out up in the main room. And along the bar and up the stairs just behind. Some expand, little flames giving a last kick before they narrow and sink. Some nearly go out, but come back a little smaller, like candles on a grave appear small, every time an urge turns you back. A few times it has seemed to you the sunlight was carrying rain in it as it fell, or each drop of rain was carrying light. For all you know, they could be biters, landing like sparks on your legs, rolling you out of the very spell they lulled you into in midnight. You were rocking in the soft mouth of the waitress, who tongues you back out of the way like gum when she asks so plainly, turning over the dying candles in her tray, if there'll be anything else or just check. Building my home in your mind. In the afternoon, after work, is the best napping time. The best time for coffee and daydreams is ridiculously early morning. The best time to make love is when the high is just going out. The best time for new snow is at the dark end of the walk. When there is a fire waiting is the best time to be miserable, wet up to your knees after you hike days into the trees. Tears are best held when there are tears rightly put before your own. Best offered when you can faithfully recall the one who used to hold you is the one who held you through. Late spring is the best dog time. The best trout time comes soon after. When the harshest wind that drives through this town drives through, that's when you will remember the smallness of your being. This is also the best time to remember how afraid Auntie is of the wind and your love for her and just how she wears that fear. Your mother used to pray for planes sputtering overhead during a storm, which has become the best time to remember your mother's prayers. How you once imagined her voice not dissolving as sound does, but traveling beyond the cold to where the sun was just rising for a humid day and someone so plainly forgot to make their bed for the first time so late in life. The best time to light too many candles is when you wish for too many candles. The best time to drink too much red wine is when you've forgotten how sad it makes you and how the cruder machinery of your hometown is slowly drowning out its original song. The best time to lie down on the floor with your dog is after getting drunk with the stupidest people that you go on loving. The best time to listen intently to a wind-blown rain is when you are completely apathetic or too heart-tender, yet exhume visions of your half-naked father in threadbare gumboots and thin underwear, rattling blindly in the late and early morning hours. To upturn a garbage can under your bedroom window, knowing how much you love the sound of rain. This has become the best time to accept the apologies he never spoke. Are you feeding yourself? Are you keeping up with the dishes? When she calls, gray afternoon, sun descending without looking back. I'm not trying anymore at the best words in some order or at the surprise that makes my utter curiosity into a whole being. She calls, and the ring, I swear, sounds anxious and hurt. Sometimes parent birds fly out before first light and are hawked on or catted, beloved house pets, whose brutality we excuse by the names we give them. When a fat squirrel lands on the corner of the house, the bird chicks cry out, their voices are dry, and we'll never know. There are too many reasons today for our trying to be apart. We talked at it, around it, and perhaps we never talked to it, and thus never through it. And somehow I've often imagined a fine membrane between our longings. It's been a contest not to breach it. And all these months apart, she's not usually the one to break when she asks, months in separate houses, would it be okay if I stayed over tonight? Of course I speak, but I should warn you, I've been drinking. This is my conversation with the broken watch or a broken clock. Of course time was passing. Of course it wasn't. For Jane. We arrived at cabin 5 at exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds and opened such a small door in the hills. At exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds, the trout were jumping in the lake. They didn't care we'd rented a cabin where time lay still. Yes, the lake was full, but my family is not that kind who eats trout. And he said not to say too much to others about this. At exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds, 5 trout jumping all at once, falling too. We'd unpacked the car and picked our beds. Why? At exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds, did the osprey act as though they were flying inside centuries of becoming and going on. At exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds, we stood in the gravel parking lot looking up at last year's forest fire. It had its back to us. Mushrooms in a bag, stipes with little pointy hats, crazy hats, and dinner approaching. Jane cooked and we ate at exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds. How do people grow old and fit into their sagging frame? How do we fly inside centuries and carry on? What are those little birds crying when the setting sun drags night in at exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds? What shorter time our lives are when the forest is burning. Mushrooms rising in ash gnawed at our quick, dumb lives and love us. It's exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds. We all leave for home in a worn vehicle whose passenger can no longer come clean and is unashamed. At exactly 8:22 and 35 seconds. Just one last poem. Unfortunately, this poem is a true story told me by the person it's written for about. Unfortunately, too, she just passed away a few days ago. And upon hearing this, her brother died 2 days later. It's called Mary. Mary. Beat with a leather strap by a nun for speaking her own language, and then beat harder for not crying. Her little brothers brought to witness. They pleaded in the only words they had. Huang Meli. Huang. Cry, Mary. Please cry. Excellent. Thank you.